Chapter 08. Rimuru's Pav. The wind in this place was stagnant, heavy with the scent of decay and ancient magic. It had been a week since the gathering at Big Brother Veldanova's garden, a rare moment of peace where we could converse as if we were ordinary beings. But now, we stood before him again, this time on the brink of battle. Veldanova, towering and resolute, began opening a portal to the seal of Ivaraj. The air crackled with energy as the rift formed before us. I stepped forward, but before crossing the threshold, I took a moment to glance at everyone around me. Seriousness etched into their faces, even the ever-playful guy was focused. A slight smile tugged at my lips as I turned back towards the portal, determined to face whatever lay ahead. We passed through the portal and into the sealed dimension, a place where time and space seemed to fray at the edges. The fabric of reality itself was cracking, splintering under the immense pressure of the creature imprisoned here. Without hesitation, we moved towards the cracks, knowing what awaited us on the other side. The moment we stepped into Ivaraj's domain, they attacked cryptids, mindless creatures born from the magicils of the world-destroying dragon. Their numbers were overwhelming, but they were weak, mere shadows of the true terror that awaited us. We cut them down effortlessly, pushing forward without delay. As we advanced, stronger cryptids began to appear, more formidable, more vicious, but still nothing we couldn't handle. The battle was relentless, an unending tide of enemies that seemed determined to drown us in their sheer numbers. Time lost its meaning as we fought, each moment blending into the next in a blur of magic and steel. Finally, we arrived at the heart of this twisted realm, where the air was thick with the raw power of destruction. There, in the center, was Ivaraj, the world-destroying dragon. His aura was overwhelming, a terrifying manifestation of death and annihilation. Even without a mind, his presence alone was enough to crush the spirits of lesser beings. "Let's go," I shouted, more to rally my own resolve than to lead the charge. The battle began with a fury that matched the dragon's might. Every attack we launched seemed to dissipate against his scales, barely leaving a scratch. Ivaraj was a beast driven purely by instinct, a mindless juggernaut of destruction that seemed invincible. Each of us fought with everything we had, but it was like trying to topple a mountain with a handful of pebbles. The ground trembled beneath our feet as the battle raged on. I could see the strain on everyone's faces, the growing frustration as our efforts seemed futile. And then, without warning, a cryptid of a different kind appeared before me, its form insectoid and humanoid, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. It struck with lightning speed, sending me crashing to the ground. "Rimuru!" I heard someone shout, but they couldn't come to my aid, they were all locked in battle with Ivaraj. I pushed myself up, facing the new threat. These creatures were different, more powerful insectars, born from the deepest recesses of Ivaraj's magic. Their numbers were few, only about 8 to 10, but each one radiated a power that demanded my full attention. I fought them with everything I had, unleashing my full power from the start. At first, it seemed like I had the upper hand, my attacks pushing them back. But as the battle wore on, the tide began to turn. Their strength was overwhelming, their movements coordinated as if they shared a hive mind. I killed 4 of them, but the remaining 6 pressed harder, forcing me onto the defensive. My breath came in ragged gasps as we clashed in hand-to-hand combat, mixing magic and physical strikes in a desperate attempt to gain the upper hand. My vision blurred, sweat mingling with blood as exhaustion set in. The ground beneath me seemed to tremble with each step, my strength waning with every passing second. And then I heard a dull thud that cut through the chaos. I glanced to the side and saw my companions struggling, losing ground against the relentless onslaught of Ivaraj. A wave of frustration and anger surged within me, my teeth grinding as I watched them falter. Suddenly, one of the cryptids lunged at me, its claws aimed straight for my heart. I couldn't move in time, my body too slow to react. But just as the attack was about to land, someone stepped in front of me, taking the blow meant for me. "Ignis!" I shouted, my voice raw with emotion. The Fire Dragon Lord stood before me, bloodied and battered but still conscious, his eyes blazing with defiance. "I'm not done yet," he grinned, even as his body trembled with pain. I let out a dry laugh, surprising myself and confusing Ignis and the others. They were also the same, always tried to protect me, always stood by my side, even when the odds were against us. I pondered silently, but at that time something inside me shifted, a cold, unyielding resolve hardening within my chest. Memories from my past life flashed before my eyes of friends who had died before I could save them, of the helplessness and despair that had haunted me. But this time, I wouldn't let it happen again. My breath steadied, the pain in my body dulling as my injuries began to heal. A voice echoed in my mind, a familiar presence that had always been with me. Unique skill Void has evolved into ultimate skill Chaos, Lord of the Void. Asterisk. A grin spread across my face, wider than ever before. I didn't know how, but I could feel it, the power that had eluded me for centuries, now within my grasp. I stretched my right arm forward, crossing my index and middle fingers, pointing them at the remaining cryptids. Magicils swirled around me, started to gather at the tips of my fingers, condensing into a sphere of purple void energy, pulsing with destructive potential, energy that grew larger with each passing second. The air hummed with power, a low, ominous sound that resonated deep within my soul. Purple void, I whispered, the words carrying a weight that seemed to silence the world around me. The sphere launched forward, a comet of pure annihilation. It tore through the air, erasing everything in its path. The 6 remaining insectars were obliterated in an instant, their forms disintegrating into nothingness. But the attack didn't stop there. It continued its path, striking Ivaraj with a force that would have leveled mountains. The dragon's massive form shuddered, but he remained standing, unharmed. Still, the attack had bought us a precious moment, time to catch our breath, to regroup. Seal, I whispered, reaching out to the consciousness within me. It's time. Asterisk. In an instant, I was in the air, my body surrounded by a swirling vortex of magicils. I didn't hesitate, didn't falter. With a single, fluid motion, I raised his hand, pointing it directly at Ivaraj. The air around me seemed to vibrate with power, a low hum that grew louder with each passing second. Void collapse, I intoned, my voice calm and steady. A massive sphere of darkness formed at my hand palm, rapidly expanding as it absorbed the surrounding energy. The sphere pulsed with a malevolent force, a void that seemed to devour everything in its path. And then, with a flick of my wrist, I sent it hurtling toward Ivaraj. The attack struck with devastating force, the impact sending shockwaves through the battlefield. For a moment, it seemed as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart, the void collapsing in on itself as it consumed Ivaraj's magicils. The dragon roared in pain, a sound that shook the heavens, as his defenses began to crumble. And they, with Ciel's guidance, I began to weave the complex magic needed to seal Ivaraj. The others, Feldway, Guy, Velzard, Velgrind, Rudra, Ignis, and Frigidus, continued to battle the dragon, each second a desperate struggle to hold him at bay. The air crackled with tension, the pressure of the moment bearing down on us all. Every breath was a battle for survival, every movement a fight against the overwhelming force that was Ivaraj. Part 2. The Seal and the Struggle. Guy's Pav. The air in this forsaken realm clung to my skin like a shroud, heavy and oppressive. The aura of Ivaraj, the world-destroying dragon, was like nothing I'd ever felt, a pulsating force that seemed to echo the end of all things. It wasn't fear that gripped me, but a fierce curiosity. I had only met Rimuru a week ago, and yet here he was, standing defiantly against this primordial beast. There was something about him, something beyond just power, that intrigued me. The way he carried himself, playful yet focused, with a carefree attitude that belied his strength. The youngest true dragon, they said, but there was more to him than that. I let out a low chuckle as I watched him from the corner of my eye. Show me what you've got, I muttered to myself. Our attacks clashed with Ivaraj's hardened scales, sending shockwaves through the fractured space around us. Velzard's ice rained down like a storm, each shard a lethal missile, while Velgrind's flames roared with the intensity of 1,000 suns. Feldway's dark energy twisted and turned like serpents, seeking any weakness in the dragon's defenses. I added my own magic to the mix, a torrent of raw energy that tore through the air with a howling fury. And yet, it wasn't enough. Ivaraj's hide was impenetrable, his movements primal yet calculated. Each swipe of his claws sent tremors through the ground, each roar a wave of destructive force that threatened to tear us apart. We were pushing ourselves to the limit, but it felt like we were only delaying the inevitable. Still, something in me burned brighter with each passing second. The thrill of battle, the challenge of facing an opponent who could match us blow for blow, it was exhilarating. I could feel the magic surging through my veins, the primal urge to crush this beast and claim victory. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Rimuru take a hit. A cryptid, one of those insectoid bastards, had blindsided him, sending him crashing to the ground. For a moment, I felt a pang of concern, but it quickly turned into a smirk as Ignis jumped in to protect him. The Fire Dragon Lord was a stubborn one, refusing to go down even after taking such a heavy blow. And then something changed. Rimuru's demeanor shifted, his playful attitude replaced by something cold, something deadly serious. I watched as he unleashed a new power, something I hadn't seen before, an attack that erased everything in its path. Even I was taken aback by its sheer destructive force. Well, I muttered, unable to hide the grin spreading across my face. So that's what you've been hiding. But there was no time to dwell on it. Ivaraj was still standing, still an unstoppable force of destruction. The attack had bought us a moment of respite, but it was clear we needed to end this quickly. I could feel the strain on everyone around me, the exhaustion creeping into their movements. We had to finish this, and fast. Let's not waste this chance, I called out, my voice echoing through the battlefield. We're going to need everything we've got. Velgrin's pav. The heat of battle was intoxicating, the flames of my attacks burning brighter as the fight wore on. I could feel the sweat on my brow, the sting of fatigue in my muscles, but I pushed it all aside. There was no room for weakness here, not against a foe like Ivaraj. My flames danced around him, searing through the air with a furious intensity. But for all their power, they barely seemed to faze him. His scales, thick and unyielding, repelled our attacks like they were nothing. It was infuriating, like trying to bring down a mountain with a handful of embers. But then I saw him, Rimuru, struggling against the insectars. My heart clenched for a moment, a brief flicker of worry crossing my mind. But I knew better than to underestimate him. I had fought him once to know that he had a strength that went beyond mere power. And when Ignis stepped in to protect him, I felt a strange sense of relief, followed by a surge of determination. We couldn't let this drag on. Ivaraj was too powerful, too relentless. But when Rimuru unleashed that new attack, I felt something shift. The power that erupted from him was incredible, something I hadn't seen before. It tore through the insectars like they were nothing, but even more than that, it gave us a chance. A chance to finally put an end to this. With a fierce growl, I summoned all the flames within me, gathering them into a concentrated inferno. Let's finish this, I shouted, my voice ringing out over the din of battle. I launched the attack with everything I had, the flames roaring like a dragon as they surged toward Ivaraj. But this time, I didn't stop there. I charged forward, using the flames as cover, my body moving with the speed of a comet. My claws, sharpened to a deadly point, aimed for the joints in his armor-like scales. It was a gamble, a desperate attempt to find a weak point, but I had no choice. As I closed in, I could feel the heat of my own flames, the intensity of the magic coursing through me. I struck with all my strength, aiming for a spot just beneath one of his massive legs. The impact was jarring, a shockwave that sent vibrations through my entire body. But as the smoke cleared, I saw it a crack, small but there, in his otherwise impenetrable hide. Now's our chance. Before I called out, it caught me mid-flight, sending me crashing into the ground with a thunderous impact. Velzard's pav. The shock of Rimuru's sudden power surge still lingered as the battlefield fell into a momentary lull. The insectars, who had been overwhelming him with their relentless attacks, were gone, eradicated by Rimuru's purple void. Yet, as I looked upon the still roaring form of Ivaraj, I knew the true challenge had only just begun. This beast, this mindless dragon, was more powerful than anything we had faced before. My frost, which could freeze entire landscapes, seemed to barely scratch him. The cold blue flames that encased my hands felt inadequate, and for the first time in a long while, doubt crept into my mind. But there was no room for doubt now. Ivaraj roared, a wave of destructive energy rippling outward from his maw. I braced myself, wings unfurling as I took to the skies, avoiding the worst of the blast. From my vantage point, I could see the others regrouping, their expressions grim but determined. We needed a coordinated assault if we were going to have any chance of bringing him down. But even as we issued the coordinated assault, a sense of dread gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. Could we really defeat this monster? As if in response to my thoughts, Ivaraj lashed out, his massive tail sweeping through the air with terrifying speed. It caught Velgrind mid-flight, sending her crashing into the ground with a thunderous impact. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to stay focused. Velgrind would be fine, she was tougher than she looked. Still, we couldn't afford to lose any more ground. With a deep breath, I channeled my magicals into a single point, preparing my most powerful attack. Ice began to crystallize around me, forming a massive spear of frozen energy. This ends now, I roared, hurling the spear toward Ivaraj's exposed underbelly. The spear flew true, striking its target with enough force to shatter mountains. But when the ice cleared, Ivaraj remained standing, his scales barely chipped. Rudra's pav. The battlefield was chaos, but amidst the clashing energies and roars of the world-destroying dragon, my mind was calm, too calm. Ivaraj was a force of pure destruction, his very existence an affront to the world we had built. Yet, here I was, fighting alongside beings of unimaginable power. Ivaraj was a threat that needed to be dealt with here and now. As I watched Velzard's ice spear and Velgrin's flames shatter against Ivaraj's scales, I knew we had to change our approach. Brute force alone wouldn't be enough. Velzard, Velgrind, we need to weaken his defenses. Guy, Feldway, support them. I ordered, my voice cutting through the din of battle. We needed to create an opening, one that Rimuru could exploit to seal the dragon once and for all. Guy responded with a wicked grin, his crimson aura flaring as he charged at Ivaraj with renewed vigor. His fists, burning with demonic energy, pounded against the dragon's limbs, each blow accompanied by a shockwave that reverberated through the battlefield. Feldway joined in, his blade slicing through the air with precision, aiming for the joints and softer parts of Ivaraj's body. Velgrind, having recovered from the earlier blow, unleashed a torrent of blue flames, her fiery breath searing through the air and enveloping Ivaraj's wings. The dragon roared in fury, his attention momentarily diverted as he tried to shake off the flames. But even as we pressed the attack, I could see it wasn't enough. We were slowing him down, but not stopping him. I turned to Rimuru, who was still recovering from his own battle. His expression was unreadable, but I could see the determination in his eyes. This was at the moment of truth. Ignis's pav. Pain coursed through my body, but I refused to back down. The injuries I had sustained from protecting Rimuru were severe, but they wouldn't stop me from fighting. I had to keep going, for Rimuru, for everyone. I pushed the pain aside, focusing on the battle at hand. "You're one hell of a stubborn bastard," I muttered, glancing at him. But the way his expression shifted cold, serious made me realize just how dire the situation was. When Rimuru unleashed that new power, I could feel the air shift, the very fabric of this realm trembling under its force. It was a sight to behold, something that made even a hardened warrior like me stop and stare for just a moment. But the battle wasn't over, not yet. The others were throwing everything they had at Ivaraj, but the dragon's sheer power was overwhelming. Even Velzard's, Velgrin's most potent attacks seemed to barely faze him. But there was something different about Rimuru now. I could feel it, the change in his aura, the surge of power that had come. As I struggled to my feet, I caught sight of him. Rimuru was watching the battle with an intensity I hadn't seen before. His usual carefree attitude was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating focus. And then, without warning, he moved. In an instant, Rimuru was in the air, his body surrounded by a swirling vortex of magicules. He didn't hesitate, didn't falter. With a single, fluid motion, he raised his hand, pointing it directly at Ivaraj. The air around him seemed to vibrate with power, a low hum that grew louder with each passing second. "Void collapse," Rimuru intoned, his voice calm and steady. A massive sphere of darkness formed at his hand palm, rapidly expanding as it absorbed the surrounding energy. The sphere pulsed with a malevolent force, a void that seemed to devour everything in its path. And then, with a flick of his wrist, Rimuru sent it hurtling toward Ivaraj. The attack struck with devastating force, the impact sending shockwaves through the battlefield. For a moment, it seemed as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart, the void collapsing in on itself as it consumed Ivaraj's magicules. The dragon roared in pain, a sound that shook the heavens, as his defenses began to crumble. Pain shot through my body, sharp and unrelenting, but I ignored it. There was no time to dwell on injuries when a battle of this scale was unfolding around us. I could feel the blood trickling down my side, the deep gashes left by the insectar's claws, but I stood firm. Rimuru was beside me, his face a mask of determination, and I couldn't help but grin despite the pain. I forced myself to focus, drawing on the fire within me, the flames that defined who I was. They roared to life, brighter and hotter than ever before, fueled by the determination to end this battle. The others were giving it their all, and I couldn't afford to do any less. With a guttural roar, I surged forward, flames trailing in my wake. My body moved on instinct, weaving between the blows of Ivaraj, the ground trembling with each of his strikes. I struck at his underbelly, the place where the scales were the thinnest, hoping to do some real damage. But it wasn't enough. Even with all our power, even with Rimuru's new attack, Ivaraj was still standing, still fighting. I could see the exhaustion in everyone's eyes, the desperation creeping into their movements. But there was something else too, a determination, a fire that burned just as brightly as my own. We're not done yet, I shouted, my voice hoarse but filled with resolve. We're gonna take this bastard down. Frigidus's paw. I watched in awe as Rimuru unleashed his new power, the sheer magnitude of the attack staggering. I had seen powerful beings in my time, but this was something else entirely. The void collapse. It was as if Rimuru had become a force of nature, a living embodiment of destruction. But even as the attack ravaged Ivaraj, I knew it wouldn't be enough to defeat him outright. We needed to seal him, to stop him from regenerating and continuing his rampage. The others seemed to realize this as well, and they began to move in, ready to support Rimuru in the final phase of the battle. With a nod to Ignis, I positioned myself near Rimuru, my blade at the ready. The icy chill of my magic spread across the battlefield, freezing the ground beneath Ivaraj and slowing his movements. It was a small advantage, but in a battle like this, every little bit helped. Rimuru didn't waste any time. As the void energy continued to weaken Ivaraj, he began the process of sealing the dragon. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the magicals converging around Rimuru as he called upon his ultimate skill. The air crackled with energy as the seal took shape, a complex array of symbols and runes forming around Ivaraj's body. The dragon thrashed and roared, but it was no use. The seal was in place, and with each passing second, it tightened, constricting Ivaraj's power and binding him once more. Rimuru's paw. The sealing process was complex, intricate magic that required absolute concentration. Seal guided me through each step, her voice calm and precise as she helped me weave the spell. The others were holding Ivaraj at bay, their attacks relentless even as the dragon's power seemed to grow with each passing moment. I could feel the strain on my body, the exhaustion from the earlier battle and the intensity of the magic I was channeling. But I couldn't afford to falter, not now. The seal had to be perfect, had to hold, or everything we'd fought for would be for nothing. Seal, how much longer? I asked, my voice strained. Just a little more, Master, she replied, her tone as calm as ever. We're almost there, I could feel the magical flow around me, coiling like a serpent as it sought to contain the immense power of Ivaraj. Each step in the process was precise, each movement of my hands crucial. I was drawing on every ounce of my strength, every bit of magic I had left. And then, as I reached the final step, something snapped. The seal clicked into place, the magic locking around Ivaraj with a force that shook the very ground beneath us. I could feel the dragon's power being contained, the immense pressure that had been crushing us slowly beginning to lift. But it wasn't over. Ivaraj let out a deafening roar, his body thrashing against the confines of the seal. The ground trembled, cracks forming in the earth as his raw power threatened to tear the seal apart. No, I shouted, pouring every last bit of my energy into reinforcing the seal. The others, sensing the danger, redoubled their efforts, their attacks growing even more ferocious. Time seemed to slow as we fought, every second stretched to its limit. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, a cacophony of emotions that I struggled to keep in check. The memories of my past life kept flashing before my eyes, memories of loss, of desperation, of the people I couldn't save. But this time, I wouldn't let history repeat itself. This time, I would succeed. Seal, we need more. I shouted, my voice barely audible over the chaos. I'm pushing everything I have, Master, she responded, her voice a mix of calm determination and urgency. But even we have limits. You'll need to draw on something deeper, something beyond just your magic. My thoughts raced as I tried to find a solution. The power of the void, the newly awakened chaos, Lord of the Void, surged within me, but even that might not be enough to contain Ivaraj completely. The others were holding the dragon at bay, but they wouldn't last much longer. Then, an idea sparked in my mind, something I had been experimenting with, but never fully mastered. A technique that could potentially amplify the seal's power, but it came with risks. I didn't have time to weigh the pros and cons, I had to act. Everyone, brace yourselves, I called out, my voice carrying a mix of desperation and resolve. I'm going to try something new. I closed my eyes, focusing all my energy into a single point within my core. The power of the void swirled around me, dark and infinite, but there was something else, a faint glimmer of light, something deeper within the darkness. I reached out to it, drawing it closer, letting it intertwine with the void. The ground beneath me began to tremble, the air around me growing thick with magicals as the new technique started to take shape. It was a fusion of void and light, a balance of chaos and order, a manifestation of both destruction and creation. It was something entirely new, a power that defied the laws of reality. With a deep breath, I released the energy, letting it flow into the seal. The magicals around me surged, the seal glowing with a blinding light as the new power merged with it. I could feel the difference immediately. The seal's strength increased tenfold, the binding force tightening around Ivaraj like a vice. The dragon roared, thrashing wildly as the seal constricted him. The ground shook violently, cracks spreading like webs beneath our feet, but the seal held firm. Ivaraj's power was being contained, his destructive force slowly being drained away by the new magic. But the strain was immense. I could feel my body weakening, my vision blurring as the last remnants of my energy were poured into the seal. I couldn't afford to falter, not now, but the exhaustion was overwhelming. My limbs felt like lead, every movement a Herculean effort. Rimuru, I heard Guy's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. Don't you dare give up now. His words were like a spark, reigniting the fire within me. I forced myself to stand taller, pushing back against the crushing weight of fatigue. I had come too far to fail now. I couldn't let everyone down. Seal, asterisk I thought, my voice shaky, I need your help. Asterisk, I'm with you, Rimuru, asterisk she replied, her voice as steady as ever. Let's finish this together. Asterisk, with Ciel's guidance, I channeled the last of my energy into the seal, reinforcing it with every bit of power I had left. The glow intensified, the binding force growing stronger with each passing second. I could feel Ivaraj's power waning, the dragon's roars growing weaker as the seal tightened around him. And then, with a final burst of energy, the seal snapped into place, locking Ivaraj within its confines. The ground stilled, the air growing quiet as the dragon's immense power was finally contained. The battle was over. I collapsed to my knees, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the exhaustion finally took hold. My body ached, every muscle screaming in protest, but the relief that washed over me was overwhelming. We had done it. We had sealed Ivaraj. The others slowly gathered around, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and relief. Velgrind and Velzard were breathing heavily, their bodies bruised and battered, but they were still standing. Guy had a wild grin on his face, his eyes alight with the thrill of battle. Feldway looked stoic as always, but there was a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. Ignis and Frigidus were the last to approach, both of them visibly injured but alive. Ignis shot me a grin, despite the blood staining his clothes. You did it, Rimuru, he said, his voice hoarse. You actually did it. I managed a weak smile in return. We did it, I corrected him. All of us. The moment of victory was bittersweet. We had won, but the cost had been high. The battle had pushed all of us to our limits, and the exhaustion was palpable. But there was a sense of unity, a bond forged in the fires of battle that couldn't be broken. As I looked around at everyone, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. They had fought with everything they had, risking their lives to ensure our victory. And in the end, we had succeeded. But there was no time to rest. The seal was in place, but it was only temporary. Ivaraj's power would eventually break through, and when that happened, we would need to be ready. We need to get out of here, I said, my voice stronger now despite the fatigue. Veldanava will need to know about this. The others nodded in agreement, their expressions growing serious once more. We had won the battle, but the war was far from over. With a final glance at the sealed Ivaraj, I began to summon a portal to Veldanava's place. The journey wasn't over yet, but at least for now, we had a moment of respite. As the portal opened before us, I took one last look at the battlefield. The space was still fractured, the remnants of the fight visible in the broken ground and the lingering magic in the air. But we had survived, and that was what mattered. Let's go, I said, stepping through the portal with the others close behind. As we crossed the threshold, I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Veldanava was waiting, and there was much to discuss. The battle had been intense, but it was only the beginning. There were still many challenges ahead, and I would need to be ready for whatever came next. But for now, I allowed myself a brief moment of satisfaction. We had faced the world-destroying dragon and lived to tell the tale. And as we emerged into the calm of Veldanava's domain, I knew that we were stronger for it. Part 3. Confronting the Aftermath. Rimuru's Pav. The transition from the chaotic battleground to Veldanava's serene domain was jarring, but the contrast was a welcome relief. The gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers, a stark reminder of the tranquility we had fought so hard to protect. As we stepped into the realm, I could feel the tension in everyone's posture ease just slightly. But the weariness was palpable, like a heavy cloak draped over our shoulders. Veldanava awaited us, his imposing figure outlined against the horizon. His presence was calming, yet there was an unmistakable gravity to his demeanor. He had been watching, I knew that much. The creator of the universe had likely observed every moment of our battle, every struggle, every close call. His eyes, deep and knowing, swept over our group as we approached. "You've done well," he said, his voice resonating with a mix of pride and concern. "But I can see the toll it has taken on you all." Velzard was the first to speak, her voice laced with exhaustion. "Ivaraj is sealed, but it won't hold forever. The seal is strong, but that creature's power, it's beyond anything we've ever faced." Veldanava nodded, his expression unreadable. "I expected as much. Ivaraj is a force of nature, an embodiment of destruction. Sealing him was always going to be a temporary solution." Feldway stepped forward, his gaze sharp. "Then what's the plan? We can't keep sealing him indefinitely. Eventually, we'll need a more permanent solution." I glanced at Veldanava, curious about his response. He was the one who had created Ivaraj, after all. Surely, he must have a plan, some way to neutralize the threat permanently. But as he met my gaze, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "The seal was meant to buy us time," Veldanava said slowly. "Time to prepare for what comes next. Ivaraj's existence is a consequence of the balance between creation and destruction. To eliminate him entirely would be to disrupt that balance." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. We had fought so hard to contain Ivaraj, but the truth was, we were dealing with forces far beyond our understanding. The universe was vast and complex, and even the creator himself was bound by its laws. I clenched my fists, frustration bubbling up inside me. So what do we do? Just wait for the seal to break and fight him again? There has to be another way. Veldanava's expression softened, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Patience, Rimuru. There is always another way. But it requires more than just strength. It requires wisdom, understanding, and trust." He turned to face the horizon, his gaze distant. "The world is changing, and with it, so must we. Ivaraj's resurgence is just one of many challenges we will face. But together, we can find a way to preserve the balance without sacrificing what we hold dear." I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me at his words. Veldanava had always been an enigma, a being of unfathomable power and knowledge. But in that moment, I realized that he was also a leader, a guide who had seen countless eons pass, and who had faced challenges far greater than anything I could imagine. He turned back to us, his eyes settling on me. "Rimuru, you've proven yourself time and time again. Your strength, your resolve, and your compassion, they are what set you apart. I believe you are the key to finding the solution we seek." I blinked in surprise, taken aback by his words. "Me? But I'm just Rimuru," Veldanava interrupted, a twinkle of amusement in his eyes. "Yes, I know, but you are also more than that. You are a true dragon, a leader, and a being who has touched the lives of countless others. You have a unique perspective, one that is not bound by the limitations of the past." The others were silent, watching the exchange with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Even Guy, who had known me for only a short time, seemed intrigued by Veldanava's words. Veldanava's pav. I watched as everyone took a moment to catch their breath, their expressions a mixture of relief and contemplation. The battle had been hard fought, and the victory well earned, but the gravity of what we had just faced weighed heavily on all of us. Rimuru, in particular, seemed to carry the burden of the battle more than anyone else. His transformation during the fight had been extraordinary, but it had also come at a cost. I could see the fatigue in his eyes, the toll that such power took on him. I stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done well, Rimuru. But remember, this is just the beginning. The path ahead will be even more challenging." Rimuru met my gaze, a determined fire burning in his eyes. "I know, but I won't back down. I'll keep getting stronger, for everyone's sake." I nodded, a small smile on my lips. "I have no doubt you will. But for now, rest. You've earned it." Rimuru's pav. As the conversation ended, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle against Ivaraj had been brutal, but it had also shown us the importance of unity and trust. There was still much to do, and the road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time since the fight began, I felt hopeful. We spent the next few hours recovering and discussing our next steps. Seal was already running calculations, analyzing the data from the battle and searching for any weaknesses in Ivaraj's power that we could exploit in the future. The others offered their insights, each bringing their unique perspective to the table. Guy, who had been relatively quiet until now, finally spoke up. You know, he said, leaning back against a tree, I'm starting to see why Veldanava is so interested in you, Rimuru. You've got something different. Something that makes people want to follow you. I raised an eyebrow at him, unsure if he was complimenting me or just being his usual enigmatic self. And what's that supposed to mean? He grinned, a hint of mischief in his eyes. It means you're interesting, and that's not something I say lightly. I'll be keeping an eye on you. I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I just nodded. Guy was a wild card, unpredictable and powerful, but there was a certain honesty to his words that I couldn't help but appreciate. As the night fell, we finally had a moment to rest. The tension of the day gradually faded, replaced by a quiet camaraderie as we sat together under the stars. The weight of what we had accomplished hung in the air, but so did the promise of what was to come. I glanced at the sky, the vast expanse of the universe stretching out before us. There was still so much we didn't understand, so much that lay beyond our reach. But as long as we were together, I knew we could face whatever challenges awaited us. Veldanava approached me one last time before we parted ways for the night. His expression was thoughtful, almost contemplative. Rimuru, he said quietly, remember that even in the darkest times, there is always light. The balance of the universe is delicate, but it is also resilient. Trust in yourself, and in those around you. The path forward may be difficult, but I believe you will find a way. I nodded, his words echoing in my mind as I prepared to rest. There was still much to do, but for now, I allowed myself to relax, to savor the victory we had achieved. The future was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure: we would face it together. And as I closed my eyes, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. We had fought, we had struggled, but we had also prevailed. And whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it, with my friends by my side. To be continued.